The day my daughter-in-law arrived at my mountain cabin, she did not ask for permission. She walked through my front door with suitcases in both hands and announced that the family was moving in to start fresh. She smiled as if the cabin already belonged to her. My son stood silently behind her. I welcomed them inside without a single argument. I even helped carry their bags. They thought they had won. But the moment they stepped into the great room, their confidence disappeared. Their faces turned pale because the one thing they never expected was waiting for them inside. Stay with me until the end because this family story takes a shocking turn that changes everything. My name is Robert. I am 67 years old and I built everything I own with my own hands. 40 years ago I was a broke carpenter who worked every weekend to save enough money for a small piece of land deep in the mountains. That land became my dream. Every paycheck bought another stack of lumber. Every vacation was spent building walls instead of relaxing. After years of sacrifice, the cabin was finally complete. It was never just a house. It was where my wife and I celebrated birthdays. It was where my children learned to fish. It was where every Christmas felt magical. After my wife passed away, the cabin became the last place where I truly felt close to her. My son Daniel always loved the cabin when he was young. He promised that one day he would bring his own children there. But everything changed after he married Melissa. Melissa had expensive taste. She believed life should always look perfect. She cared more about appearances than memories. Every conversation somehow turned into money. She constantly asked why I still lived alone in such a beautiful property. At first I ignored the comments. Then she started suggesting that I move into a retirement community because it would be easier for me. I politely refused every time. Months later, Daniel called and said they were struggling financially. Their apartment rent had increased and they needed help. I offered to lend them money. Melissa rejected the offer. She said living in my cabin made more sense because family should support family. I explained that the cabin was my permanent home and I was not interested in sharing it. The conversation ended with silence. For weeks nobody called. Then one rainy afternoon I heard tires outside. I looked through the window and saw a moving truck. Melissa jumped out first. She smiled as if she had already won. She walked straight to my front porch carrying two large suitcases. She laughed and said, "That fancy cabin, and we are moving in to bury the hatchet." Without waiting for my answer, she pushed the front door open and started bringing bags inside. Daniel looked embarrassed but followed her anyway. Melissa walked through every room giving instructions about where furniture should go. She talked about repainting the walls. She talked about replacing my furniture. She even said the upstairs bedroom would become their master suite. I simply smiled. I helped carry another box. Melissa whispered to Daniel that I finally understood. But I had not said yes. I was simply waiting. As they walked into the great room, they suddenly stopped. Every smile disappeared. Their faces drained of color. Mounted above the fireplace was a large framed document. Next to it stood my attorney. Beside him sat two security officers. Melissa froze. She looked at me with confusion. My attorney calmly welcomed everyone. Then he explained that I had invited them to witness something important. Months earlier I had transferred the cabin into an irrevocable family preservation trust. The trust clearly stated that nobody could sell it. Nobody could move into it permanently without my written approval. Nobody could inherit it unless they respected its original purpose. Any attempt to pressure me into giving away the property would automatically remove that person from receiving any future benefit connected to the trust. Melissa looked directly at Daniel. Daniel looked at the floor. The attorney continued speaking. He explained that the cabin would eventually become a free retreat for military veterans and grieving families because that was my late wife's lifelong dream. A local charity had already agreed to manage the property after my lifetime. My personal belongings would remain exactly where they were. The trust had already been legally finalized months before. There was nothing anyone could change. The room became completely silent. Melissa slowly sat down. She finally realized that no amount of pressure could rewrite years of careful planning. For the first time since arriving, she had nothing to say. Daniel quietly apologized. He admitted he should never have allowed things to reach this point. He confessed that he had ignored many warning signs because he wanted to avoid conflict. I told him that avoiding conflict often creates even bigger problems. Respect must always come before inheritance. Love must never depend on property. Money can build houses, but only character builds families. Melissa eventually apologized as well. She admitted she had viewed the cabin as an investment instead of a home filled with memories. Her apology sounded sincere. Her apology sounded sincere. Whether it came from regret or disappointment, only time could answer. They packed their bags that evening. Before leaving, Daniel hugged me longer than he had in years. He said he finally understood why the cabin mattered so much. Weeks later, he returned alone. This time, he brought groceries instead of moving boxes. We spent the weekend repairing an old fishing dock together. We laughed like we had when he was a child. Slowly, our relationship healed. Melissa stayed away for several months. Then one day she asked if she could visit. She arrived carrying fresh flowers for my late wife's memorial. She apologized again. This time there were no discussions about money, no conversations about ownership, only quiet respect. People can change when they choose humility over pride. The cabin remained exactly as my wife dreamed. Every photograph stayed on the wall. Every family tradition continued. Years later, children laughed around the fireplace once again, not because someone claimed ownership, but because love had finally returned. Some people believe the greatest inheritance is a house. They are wrong. The greatest inheritance is wisdom, respect, and family values. Property can be replaced. Trust cannot. If this story reminded you that kindness is stronger than greed, then carry that lesson into your own family, because the choices we make today become the legacy we leave tomorrow.